crazy. But our little shit stain Rock didn't actually like going door to door begging for money, believe it or not. He would consider them humiliations of the highest order, and this would instill a deep hate for the Catholic Church within him that would never go away, as we will see. But from a young age, Rock was taught pain. When Rock was a child with his siblings, his father would make them all gather around a dinner table and play a game called Bone. That sounds terrifying. This game consisted of everybody sitting around the table and proceeding to kick each other's shins until they drew blood with either hard boots or steel toe boots. And then the first person to say ouch or stop or dear God, my leg hurts would lose. Which to a certain point, I feel like when I was a kid, we used to like hit each other's hands and see like which one of us ducked out first, but I didn't do it with my father, and I didn't do it to the point of bleeding. So that's pretty fucked up. Another ingredient in our cult leader stew. Rock would also claim his father would push him down the stairs and lock him in the basement cellar. And one of Rock's wives later in life would say that Rock claimed he was beaten relentlessly by his father as a child, so much so that he had internal scarring on his organs. But all these claims could never be confirmed. And what didn't help his story either is, besides his neighbors saying Rock's father was a little odd by being in the white berets, none of the children ever actually showed signs of, nor did any of the other siblings ever claim any of this ever happened. So you're gonna start seeing a little pattern here of Rock being a manipulative, lying piece of shit, but we'll get more into that as well. But back to his childhood. So Rock was widely known as a troubled kid. He'd steal money and cigarettes from his parents, who didn't, am I right? Just kidding. And he would also blame that on his siblings, so he was probably a middle child or the youngest. In a memoir he wrote that was 173 pages long, he would tell stories of his childhood that I don't even think an actual child would believe to this day. He would create these like grandiose stories that were clearly not real. One of them being this. He said in his memoir that when he was a child, he was walking home from school and he came across a mother bear and her cubs, but instead of her attacking him and killing him like they probably would, she took him in as one of their own and played with him for the entire afternoon, and then he went home and was fine. So there's that. Rock would also lie about ailments that he had as a child to elicit sympathy, which again, I feel like that's something kids kind of do. I faked sick when I wanted to get out of school. So, but am I a cult leader? Did I create a murder mutilation cult? No. He almost had Munchausen syndrome, but he was a complete narcissist as well, so I think it kind of went hand in hand with each other. He would claim to have infantile paralysis until the age of 6, claimed he was unable to speak until the age of 8, and he claimed that he could hardly walk until the age of 12, when he did. Everybody knew that he did. He would just lie. He was just a pathological liar. Now, obviously, none of his claims were true, but there was one that rang to be actually true, and that is that he had a disturbingly large I don't, it was in the book. It was in the book, so I felt like it was important to know. I don't know that that's real. I've not seen a picture, but I'm just going off the literature. So Rock would move into his teenage years, and naturally, at the age of 14, he would come to the conclusion that he was too smart for school and would drop out, which actually he was one of the top students. He had a very high IQ, which helped him in later years, tricking people into being in his cult, as we will learn. So he would work shoveling snow, mowing lawns, and hanging out at bars, as you do when you're 14. Am I right? Just kidding. So in 1967, he met a woman named Francine Gridier, sorry if I butchered your name, at a dance hall, and he would soon after get married. They would move in with one another and have 2 children pretty quickly after they got married. And Rock would get a job at a fire hall doing local inspections. Even though he didn't have a high school education, he was able to talk his way into a lot of jobs, regardless of him not having an education. And it was around this time Rock would start to form into the giant adult shit stain he became. In 1971, he began suffering from duodenal ulcers, and doctors would remove part of his stomach to alleviate some of his symptoms. And by the time he needed his second surgery, he had already gathered a bunch of medical textbooks and would memorize them so that when he went into his second surgery, he was able to recite the surgery step by step. So basically, he was backseat driving his own surgery. I've never heard anything more Canadian than that, and pretentious. And the surgery stuff will come into play later as well. Stay tuned for that. It's Duh. So although getting multiple surgeries for his ulcers, the pain would not go away. At least according to Crybaby Rock, who was already notorious for over-exaggerating every aspect of his life, including pain, as we know. He was the poster boy and founding father of the man cold, essentially. So this would lead him to become a full-on hypochondriac, convincing people that his insides were made of plastic and his death was always right around the corner. I wish. This would also lead him to become extremely erratic because his little tummy hurt that somehow gave him license to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, without regard for anyone else. But most noteworthy, this would cause him to have a completely different outlook on sex specifically. For example, at the beginning of Rock's and Francine's marriage, he would make her dress very conservatively. He'd make her wear very long dresses and cover up when they were in public and even when they were at home. But after the surgeries, he would demand her to wear miniskirts, crop tops, and very explicit clothing, and he would not talk to her about anything other than sex. So just your typical male, basically. I'm just kidding. He would even go as far as to ask his in-laws if he could open a nudist colony at their farm, and they would obviously reject his proposal, but I can't even imagine going up to Caleb's parents after meeting them for the first time and just pitching that to them. So Rock is now becoming a full-blown narcissistic piece of shit. And what's the best job for a narcissistic piece of shit? A politician. So he would get into his local council, but not surprisingly be voted out very shortly after because all the ideas he would bring to the table were extremely grandiose and would literally bankrupt the city if they did any of them. So Rock, still wanting a position of power, would try his hand at working as a Freemason in the Aromas Club. Now, the Aromas Club was a Catholic organization, which, remember, Rock hates Catholics, given his past with his father. So he used this to his advantage. He would gain their trust and gain control over the initiation ceremonies, which ushered in a lot of new members. See where this is going? Yeah, that's where it's going. And in time, Rock would change the rituals to reflect his own hatred for the Catholic Church. Naturally, most of the members of the club would think he's batshit crazy and wouldn't follow him. Rock would then drop out of the club and replace the painkillers for drinking instead, which is awesome. Kidding. And shortly after that, he would soon find his cult niche, which was women. His first disciple being Giselle Tremblay. Giselle would grow up in a very cold and household. Her father would also talk shit to her about her own mother, his wife, and say that she had to be nothing like her own mother because she wasn't completely devoted to him and obeyed everything he said. So this naturally progressed into Giselle having a string of very toxic relationships, the worst being Rock. And this would lead to her mutilation later in the story. They would meet in a bar, and Rock, still being married by the way, would write Giselle love letters and convince her that it hurt him that she had the audacity to sleep with anybody else because she had a boyfriend at the time as well. He would also convince Giselle that his wife was cheating on him, which she wasn't, and he also threw in the fact that he had cancer, but he didn't actually have cancer. I just can't imagine sitting with a guy and being like, please tell me, are you actually married? And he's just like, yes, I'm sorry, but she is a total bitch. And she's just like, and he's like, and I have cancer? Oh my God, you poor baby. Yes, I am a poor baby, so take off all your clothes. I just don't understand. So naturally, this would sway Giselle to leave her life and spend all her free time and work for Rock. They would sell homemade beer mugs at local fairs. Shortly after that, Giselle would leave her current relationship, and Rock would leave his wife and his 2 children behind without looking back. And Giselle and Rock would move to Benford Mines, Quebec. And this is where Rock would become obsessed with religion, reading the Bible incessantly and denouncing the Catholic Church. And this is where he would find passages in the Old Testament that highlighted that women must be submissive towards men, and started to revolve and create his own religion based off of those passages and those passages alone. He basically just looked for the ones he liked and it just built a whole religion around that. He just forgot about the whole, respect your neighbor and your wife, and he just opted for women should be subservient to their husbands. So at this point, Rock did not have a church of his own or any kind of his own following, really. But this is also when a Seventh-day Adventist preacher, Pierre Zita, would move into town and start his own church. Rock, being new to the Seventh-day Adventists, which I'm going to refer to as the SDA because that is a mouthful I don't want to keep repeating, was extremely intrigued from the start because they represented everything Catholicism did not. For those of you who don't know, the the SDA are essentialists who preach a simple life with an enormous amount of restriction, aka a prime breeding ground for a cult. The SDA Church is a Protestant denomination characterized by its observance of the biblical Sabbath, which is Saturday instead of Sunday like most Christian religions, and it emphasizes on the imminent second coming of Jesus Christ. And its fundamental creed is the Bible and the Bible alone. Adventists are also well known for emphasizing healthy lifestyle habits, probably the only